My husband stole my inheritance and bought his ex a house. When I called him out, he said, "She needed it more than you." I stared at him in disbelief and asked, "What about our children?" He chuckled coldly, "They'll understand one day." That's when I handed him the divorce papers and the court summons. My name is Mara, and I live in Asheville, North Carolina. I'm 43 years old, a high school English teacher, and a mother of two. For a long time, my life felt like a quiet hum. Not extraordinary, not terrible, just steady. I liked it that way. Or at least, I thought I did. Graham and I met in college. He wasn't the most charming man in the room, but he was ambitious. He always had ideas, plans, schemes, visions. I was drawn to that energy, the way he spoke about the future as if he could bend it to his will. I wanted something solid, something that looked like forever. And for a while, I thought I had it with him. We got married when I was 27. By then, he was deep into real estate. I was teaching and loving it. Our first child, Mina, came a year later. Jasper followed 3 years after. Our home was loud and messy and filled with the kind of chaos only small children can bring. I stayed busy. Graham stayed busier. He was always working. On his phone during dinner, slipping out early on weekends. I asked questions, but he always had answers. Contracts, inspections, clients. I let it go. I told myself that was the price of his success, that I had my own world, my classroom, the kids, the home. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't notice the distance growing. Little silences, small withdrawals, missed anniversaries that became habitual rather than accidental. Then my father died. He wasn't young, but he wasn't old enough to go the way he did quickly, without warning. One morning, he was calling to ask how Mina's piano recital went, and by nightfall, he was gone. Heart failure. It was like a gaping hole tore open in my chest, and I couldn't fill it with anything. He left me an inheritance. Not a fortune, but substantial. Enough to put aside for the kids' education, maybe fix the roof, take the trip to Ireland I always talked about but never dared plan. That money wasn't just a safety net, it was a final gift from my father, something he gave me to make life just a little easier. I told Graham about it, of course. I didn't hide it. He said all the right things. "That's great, Mara. He'd want you to have that security." But he never asked what I planned to do with it. Not once. Months passed. I opened an account in my name, separate from the one we shared. I had my bank statements mailed to the school, just to be safe. I didn't think he'd take it, but I didn't trust him not to try and steer it. Something in my gut had shifted. The night everything came undone wasn't loud. There was no screaming, no broken plates or slammed doors. Just quiet. I'd come home late after a parent-teacher meeting. The kids were at my sister's place for a sleepover. I stepped into the living room, and there he was, sitting with a glass of whiskey, staring at nothing. He didn't even say hello. "I bought a house," he said, like it was the weather. I stood there, my bag still on my shoulder. "For Delia." I felt my stomach flip. Delia. The name fell like a stone into the room. I hadn't heard it in years. She was his college girlfriend. The one who, according to him, taught him everything he didn't want in a partner. He used to say that with a smirk. Apparently, things had changed. She was in trouble, he said. Divorced. Living in a motel with her kids. No help. No stability. So I helped her, he said simply. I couldn't move. My ears rang. With what? He sipped his drink. With the inheritance. The words knocked the air out of my chest. I remember leaning against the wall because I genuinely thought I might fall. I felt cold and hot all at once. I was shaking. She needed it more than you, he said. That sentence is seared into my memory. Not just the words, but the way he said them, flat, unmoved, like he wasn't talking about the mother of his children. I asked, "What about our children?" He laughed. Laughed. "They'll understand one day." And just like that, something inside me died. The part of me that had spent years justifying his coldness, brushing off the missed birthdays, forgiving the unkind words. That part went silent. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I walked to the kitchen, opened the drawer where I kept the emergency folder, insurance, birth certificates, everything important. I pulled out the envelope I had prepared months before. I'd suspected something. Not this, but something. Read it, I said. He didn't even flinch when he opened it. Just read the first page, then looked at me with something like amusement. You're serious? I nodded. It was the divorce petition. And a summons. Camilla, my friend from college, was now a family lawyer. She'd helped me file everything, just in case I ever needed it. I had no proof until that moment, but I had instincts. Women always know. The weeks that followed were surreal. Graham's mask slipped completely. He became someone else, no. He became exactly who he'd always been, only now he didn't bother hiding it. He accused me of betrayal. Said I was ruining the family. Said I was turning the kids against him. But I had proof. Bank records. Transfers. Emails he'd carelessly left in our shared computer. The house deed in Knoxville. Her name on it. His signature. Mina cried a lot. Jasper got quiet. I brought in a therapist immediately. Told the school. Talked to their teachers. I made sure their lives stayed as normal as possible. We went to court. It was ugly. Graham tried to paint me as irrational, as a woman scorned. But he couldn't argue with the evidence. The judge saw right through him. I was granted full custody. Child support was set. The house in Knoxville? A civil case is pending. Delia still lives there, but she won't for long. Graham tried to talk to me once outside the courtroom. He got close, leaned in like he used to when he wanted to intimidate. You'll regret this. I looked at him and said, not as much as our children will regret knowing what you are. He didn't follow me that time. Now, it's been 6 months since the divorce was finalized. I'm still in the same house. I'm repainting the living room next weekend, soft green. Something that feels like starting over. The mornings are quiet again, but in a different way. No tension. No forced conversations. Mina's taking piano again. Jasper wants to learn how to bake. I let him make a mess of the kitchen every Saturday. I still get scared. At night, mostly. I think about the years I lost, the trust one gave to a man who didn't deserve it. But I also think about the strength it took to leave, the silence I broke. I haven't told Mina and Jasper everything. Not yet. But I will. One day, when they're older, when they ask why things ended, I'll tell them the truth. Because they deserve it. Because they'll understand one day. I found out more in the weeks that followed than I had in years of marriage. Pieces started clicking together, timelines unraveling in my mind like loose threads that had finally been yanked hard enough. It turned out, Graham had been helping Delia long before my father passed. The inheritance was just his opportunity to escalate things, to make her comfortable. The man who once criticized me for spending too much on Mina's braces had bought another woman a dishwasher and a backyard play set for children who weren't his. I found receipts. Not just money transfers, but gifts. Furniture. Flights. A rental car agreement under a business name I'd never seen before. I sat in our garage one evening, boxes from our joint storage scattered around me, and cried harder than I had at my father's funeral. Not because of Graham, but because I had made excuses for so long, ignored so many signs, dismissed my own instincts in favor of peace. Camilla came by one night after the court hearing where the judge granted temporary full custody. She brought Thai food and sat with me while I picked at rice I couldn't taste. You know this isn't your fault, right? She asked. I nodded. But I didn't believe it. Not yet. The kids were adapting in their own ways. Mina stopped asking about her father. She threw herself into her piano lessons, staying up late to practice pieces far too advanced for her age. It was her way of processing. Jasper, on the other hand, wanted to sleep in my bed every night. I let him. I didn't have the heart to say no. There were moments that made it hard to breathe. Like when I opened the junk drawer in the kitchen and found a crumpled note Graham had scribbled years ago, directions to the hospital when Jasper was born. I stared at it for minutes, frozen by the weight of memories that suddenly felt like they belonged to someone else. Or when I overheard Mina telling her friend on the phone, my dad lives somewhere else now. He bought a house for some lady and her kids instead of us. Her voice didn't crack. That somehow hurt more. Everywhere I turned, reminders whispered of a life that was no longer mine. Our bed, once shared, now felt like an empty stage. His coffee mug still in the dishwasher. That stupid gray hoodie of his that Jasper loved wearing because it smelled like him, stuffed now in the back of the closet because I couldn't bear to throw it away and couldn't stand to see it. He called a few times. Left messages, most of them sterile and transactional. I need to know when I can pick up the rest of my things. Or, can you ask Mina if she's still doing piano on Thursdays? I didn't respond. Not yet. Not until I could hear his voice without feeling like I was going to split in two. And then there was Delia. She reached out once. A long, meandering email, written in polite, over-explanatory prose. She didn't know the money came from my inheritance. She'd never wanted to hurt me. She thought Graham had full control of the funds. She ended it with, I hope one day you can forgive me. I stared at her words for so long that they started to blur. She was a stranger, yet she'd managed to displace my life like she was invited to. Like she deserved it more. I didn't reply. Instead, I printed the email and tucked it into the folder I kept with everything else: statements, legal docs, pictures. A chronicle of the unraveling, Life had its way of moving forward, though. My mother came to stay with us for a while. She cooked, cleaned, and hovered like mothers do, her way of apologizing for not seeing the cracks sooner either. She said something one morning while making coffee. "You're stronger than I ever was." I didn't know how to answer her. By fall, Mina started a new school program for gifted students, and I began to notice a little spark returning to her. Jasper joined a local soccer team, running across that muddy field with a grin that reached his ears. I sat on the sidelines in my worn coat, clapping and cheering, pretending I wasn't aching inside. But even in the good moments, there was a dull throb. It was the holidays that hit hardest. The first Thanksgiving without Graham. I didn't know how to carve the turkey alone. Not because I couldn't, but because that had always been his job. Something stupidly symbolic, but meaningful. I tried to keep it light for the kids. We watched old movies, played board games, burned the pie crust, and laughed about it. But when they finally went to bed, I sat at the table, staring at the empty chair across from me, wondering how someone could give up a family like ours and feel justified. The civil case was still pending. Camilla was pushing for compensation, not just for the stolen funds, but for emotional damages. It would take time. Maybe years. Meanwhile, Graham had moved in with Delia. That much I knew from mutual acquaintances, the ones who didn't quite know which side to take and ended up slipping information by accident. He posted pictures. Him, smiling with Delia at some fall festival, their arms around each other. Her children on his shoulders. I didn't show them to the kids. There were days I felt nothing. Just a numb kind of fog that hung over everything. And then there were days I woke up angry at him, at myself, at the years I'd given to a man who couldn't even see us as a priority. Sometimes I'd take drives alone after dropping the kids off. Just me, the road, and whatever music didn't remind me of him. I'd end up in places we used to go, the lake we once picnicked at, the old diner off I-40 where he proposed, the bookstore downtown that he never wanted to enter, but always waited outside for me. All of them haunted now. But I kept going, kept teaching, grading papers, packing lunches, folding laundry. Kept showing up for the kids. Because if I didn't, who would? The silence was different now. Less suffocating, more contemplative. I found moments of clarity in it. I journaled, painted, started a savings account again. I even smiled sometimes. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But it was beginning to feel like something new was on the horizon. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to find out what it was. Winter settled in slowly that year. The kind that doesn't announce itself with snowstorms or biting winds, but creeps in through the cracks of your windows, finds the softest parts of you, and stays there. The days grew shorter, the skies duller, and with them, my energy waned. But life didn't pause. Life never pauses, even when you wish it would just stop for one breath. I found myself leaning on routines more than ever, packing lunches, checking homework, folding warm laundry straight from the dryer. I would sit on the edge of my bed some mornings, just staring at the wall, until Jasper would yell from the hallway that he couldn't find his left shoe again. His voice always brought me back. I started going to therapy. Camilla gently nudged me into it, insisting I deserved more than just survival. I went in with low expectations. What could a stranger possibly say to me that I hadn't already told myself at 2 a.m. while staring at the ceiling? But Dr. Rana wasn't interested in fixing me. She asked questions, quiet ones that settled in my bones long after our sessions ended. "Who were you before all this?" That one stayed with me. It made me think of things I'd forgotten, my poetry journals from college, my dream of visiting Scotland, the way I used to paint wildflowers in watercolors just for fun. I didn't miss Graham, I missed myself. The woman who once thought she could do anything. At school, my students started noticing the change. I smiled more. I began incorporating art into our reading units. We painted scenes from To Kill a Mockingbird and turned The Great Gatsby into a collage of broken glass and gold glitter. They loved it. And I remembered why I chose this career in the first place, not just for the paycheck or the schedule, but because I believed in growth. In transformation. Even in the face of pain. The kids continued to surprise me with their resilience. Mina, ever the quiet thinker, began writing short stories and leaving them on my nightstand without a word. Little fictional pieces about lonely girls and strange new worlds, always with a bittersweet ending. I kept every single one. Jasper, on the other hand, became fascinated with astronomy. He taped paper stars to his ceiling and insisted on moon talks before bed, rambling questions about black holes and Mars and what happens when a star dies. I told him, as gently as I could, that sometimes stars just burn out. But sometimes, they explode and light up the entire sky before they go. He liked that version better. Around mid-January, Graham called again. This time, I picked up. I was thinking maybe I could see the kids next weekend, he said, like we were discussing a grocery run. I didn't answer right away. I could hear Delia's voice faintly in the background, laughing at something. You'd have to arrange it through the lawyer, I finally said. You know that. He sighed. Why are you making this so difficult? I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. I'm not, I said quietly. You did that all on your own. I hung up. After that, he tried less often. Eventually, not at all. Mina never asked why. She never talked about him. She simply stopped mentioning his name altogether. I wondered if that was better or worse than anger. Jasper still asked questions now and then. Simple ones, usually. Does Dad still live in Knoxville? Or did Dad like oatmeal cookies? But never the ones I feared most. Why did he leave? Or was it my fault? I prayed those questions never came. And if they did, that I'd be strong enough to answer them with truth and grace. My mother moved back to her condo in Charlotte once spring peeked its head through the frost. Her leaving was hard. We'd fallen into a rhythm, but she deserved her own space again, her peace. Before she left, she gave me an envelope filled with cash. For the kids, she said. For anything they need. I knew it was more than she could comfortably afford, and I cried after she left. There was something about her quiet sacrifice that pierced me deeper than any court document ever had. Camilla invited me out for drinks one Friday evening in March. A local bar that had poetry nights and dim lighting. I hadn't gone out in over a year. I almost said no. But something in me said yes. It was a strange thing, putting on lipstick again. Choosing earrings. Picking out a dress that didn't scream teacher or tired mom. When I walked into the bar, I didn't recognize the woman in the bathroom mirror. But she didn't look unhappy. She looked ready. We sat in a booth, sipping wine, listening to strangers spill their hearts into microphones. It was raw and awkward and beautiful. Camilla nudged me halfway through the second act. You should go up there sometime. I shook my head. Maybe one day. But I didn't mean never. Later that night, after the kids had gone to bed and the house was quiet again, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. I started writing not about Graham, not directly, but about endings. About love that vanishes. About choosing yourself. I didn't stop for hours. The civil case dragged on, of course. Delia lawyered up. Graham claimed ignorance, which was ironic considering all the documentation we had. Camilla remained calm through it all. I admired her for that. For the fire she kept banked behind her professional cool. Some days I felt invincible. Other days, a single voicemail from a collections agency or the memory of Graham's laugh could send me spiraling. But I was learning to ride those waves instead of letting them drown me. My therapist said healing wasn't linear. That it came in fits and starts, like spring weather, sun one day, storms the next. And she was right. One sunny afternoon, Mina and Jasper were out front kicking a soccer ball, and I was trimming the hedge that had grown wild over the winter. My neighbor, an older man named Mr. Leary, came over to chat. He told me his wife passed last fall. Cancer. I still talk to her, he said, looking up at the sky. Probably always will. I smiled. Some people don't ever really leave. He nodded. But the ones who do by choice? Don't waste too much breath on them. That stuck with me. More time passed. I painted the bathroom a soft blue. Replaced the curtains in the kids' rooms. Learned how to snake a clogged drain and refinish a dresser. Small victories, but they felt like declarations. I was here. I was capable. I was mine again. And one morning, while organizing old boxes in the garage, I found a letter my father had written to me. It had been tucked inside a dusty photo album, folded neatly, addressed in his familiar handwriting. Mara, it began, you have always had more strength in you than you realize. The letter from my father was brief, maybe 2 paragraphs. He'd written it after Mina was born, tucked it away in that old photo album full of faded birthdays and beach vacations from the 90s. The handwriting was neat, but aged by time. Mara, it said, you have always had more strength in you than you realize. Life has its way of testing us, not by what it gives, but what it takes away. But you've always rebuilt, even when it wasn't fair. Remember, you're allowed to start again. And no one, not even someone you love, gets to decide your worth. I read it 3 times, then placed it in a small frame beside my desk. The civil case came to a head not long after. We had enough documentation to make things very uncomfortable for both Graham and Delia. Camilla had worked relentlessly, threading together the financial paper trail Graham had left like breadcrumbs, careless, arrogant breadcrumbs. At first, he tried to play the wounded ex-husband. Claimed I was doing it for revenge, that I was bitter. But judges don't respond well to men who steal from their wives and funnel money into secret investments under the name of an ex-girlfriend, especially when that money was explicitly protected by probate court as inheritance. In the final hearing, Graham sat beside his lawyer, jaw clenched, tapping his pen like it was the only thing holding him together. Delia showed up, too, though she didn't say much. Just sat with her lips pressed thin, eyes darting around like she wanted to be anywhere else. The judge ruled in our favor. Not just a return of the stolen funds, but additional damages for financial misconduct. Nearly double what he had taken. The Knoxville house? Seized and liquidated. Delia and her kids were given 60 days to vacate. I didn't celebrate outwardly. There was no fist pump, no scream of joy in the parking lot. Just a quiet kind of satisfaction. A balance restored. Justice, not vengeance. I didn't say a word to Graham as we left the courtroom. He looked at me, maybe searching for something. An apology, pity, a last grasp of control. I gave him nothing. Weeks later, I received the first of the payments from the court-ordered restitution. It wasn't just the money, it was the message. That he couldn't just walk away from what he'd done and pretend it didn't matter. There was a cost, and he had to pay it. With that money, I opened an education savings account for Mina and Jasper. Not under our old bank. A new one. A clean slate. I also put a down payment on something I'd dreamed about for years, but never allowed myself to even research, a small art studio space downtown. Nothing huge, just a single room with good lighting, white walls, and a view of the street. I turned it into a weekend workshop for teens, combining creative writing and visual arts. It filled up faster than I expected. The first time I unlocked that studio door and watched a group of nervous, wide-eyed teenagers walk in with sketchbooks and notebooks, I felt something shift. Not a beginning, not an ending. Just right. One evening, as I was closing up the studio, a woman walked in. She looked tired, holding a binder and a confused smile. "I'm sorry," she said. "I thought this was the tutoring center." I smiled and gave her directions. As she turned to leave, she paused. "This is your space?" I nodded. "It's beautiful," she said, then left. I stood there for a moment after she'd gone, looking around. Paint-splattered aprons, thumbtacked poems on corkboards, dried brushes in jars. It wasn't grand. But it was mine, built from everything I was told I'd lost. Back at home, the kids were doing well. Mina entered a writing competition for middle schoolers and placed second. Jasper finally learned how to crack eggs without making a mess. We hung fairy lights around the back porch and started Friday night movie marathons. Little rituals, stitched together slowly. Graham rarely called now. The court had ordered supervised visitation, but he didn't follow through. I stopped waiting for him to be a father. The kids stopped hoping. And that was its own quiet form of grief, but also a release. I never told them the full story. But one night, Mina came into the kitchen while I was folding towels and asked, "Do you think some people just stop loving you?" I looked at her for a long time. "No," I said. "I think some people were never capable of real love to begin with. But that's not your fault." She nodded, tucked her chin against my shoulder, and stayed there for a while. In the spring, I submitted one of my old poems to a local magazine under a pen name. It was about losing something slowly, like water draining from a cracked vase. They published it. Paid me $50. I framed the check. The days felt fuller now. Not easier, not lighter. But fuller. Real. And every time I stepped into that studio, every time I dropped a check into the kids' college fund, every time I sat on the porch with tea in hand and watched the trees sway like they were whispering something secret, I remembered who I was. And I never let him take that from me again.